I want to ask on stage to come now for our next discussion. If you could do this while I'm still talking, Luís Araújo, who's the president of Turismo de Portugal, Frédéric Hocquard, who's the deputy mayor of Paris, Yolanda Perdomo, who's a global tourism strategist, ICF, thank you, and virtually we have Dr. Dianne Dredge, who's the founder of the Tourism CoLab International Academy for the Study of Tourism. Now, please take a seat. I'll sit down too. The theme of sustainability is absolutely key to this discussion. I don't want to get waylaid by talking about COVID stuff too much. Let's just deal with what the projects are that everybody here is involved with, because they do all involve the issue of local communities and the idea of sustainability. And lots of young people that I talk to particularly want to go to places where that is very, very key to the way that an area is developed. And I think it's a huge factor, the sustainability angle is a huge factor in the willingness of local communities to embrace more tourism projects in their area. In other words, they won't do it. They don't want to do it unless there is a sustainable path to it. And by the way, sustainability, and I keep stressing this, isn't just about environment. It's not just about waste management or whatever, or climate. It's actually about diversity. It's about the workforce, people, making sure that everybody gets a chance, making sure that everybody has a stake. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to just go around the table and just please tell me, first of all, what is your project? Just describe succinctly, if you can, what your project is, and how does your project encourage sustainability, and possibly with illustrations too. Dianne, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's incredibly important to have this broader perspective on what sustainable tourism is. And in my own work, and my own work stretches from working with very local communities right the way through to giving advice to the European Commission and the OECD. And what I've been working on for the last 20-something odd years is this concept of regenerative tourism. And what we're really trying to do with regenerative tourism is to expand and to deliver sustainable tourism, but ramping it up. So regenerative tourism really is about putting life, and that's the well-being of both people and the planet, before profit. And we know that we need to have, a healthy economy, but we need to really deliver net positive benefit to both the planet and to the population before we can have a healthy economy. And so while the SDGs and sustainable development is important, what we've been trying to do is really to deliver on a couple of other really key points. And the first key point is really around addressing all of those multiple tipping points that you're going to be hearing a lot about at the conference today, I'm assuming. Things like crisis change and biodiversity loss, geopolitical shifts, and things like the restructuring of the economy. Regenerative tourism also delivers on that question of the social license, that we're really trying to talk with communities and have tourism delivered or work with communities instead of having tourism imposed on communities. And then the third area that we work in is in terms of really trying to shift the mindset. And when we're shifting mindset with the local communities that we work in, it's about how we work. It's about the kind of concepts that we're using, redefining tourism, redefining what a visitor is, and also redefining value. So what I've been doing in the Tourism CoLab is really working with local communities to shift, to address all of those things, but to really shift the mindset. And for me, it's really a paradigm shift that we're working in here.
We'll talk more about that as we go along. Is that your phone? We'll talk more about that as we go on, certainly in terms of redefining what a tourist is. But I just wonder if you could quickly give me an illustration, an example of where that is in practice.
Yeah, so we're currently working with a small community that, as a result of COVID, has actually had a lot of tourists coming to it. It's a little island off the Tasmanian coast called Flinders Island. They've had a big influx of tourists, and they're starting to get really concerned about the level of tourism, but also the impacts that it's having. And there's a lot of anxiety and mental health issues as a result of that. And it doesn't matter whether, you know, you're in Venice or Barcelona or a little island off, you know, the edge of the world in Tasmania. It really has been about trying to work with the communities and ground up, build those solutions ground up with the community.
We talked about ground up, bottom up, if you like, at the beginning, and this is a very good example of that. Thank you. Well, we'll come back to you, Dianne. Yolanda, just give me a quick summary of what your projects are and an illustration too, if you could.
Sure. We do sustainable destination management. That means that from all these elements that are within destination management, we don't approach them with a different perspective. Everything must be fully sustainable, from product development to marketing, air connectivity, or branding and communication. So we work together so that the whole strategy is fully sustainable.
You're talking about Lanzarote, aren't you, in particular?
I'm talking in general, but I was going to mention this example because this is what we are doing right now. Actually, we designed a strategy for Lanzarote last year during the pandemic. It was a request they made before, but actually we did the field work just like 1 week before everything closed. It was so once we started working, we saw that this could be a solution to all the new challenges that we're having right now in this post-pandemic era that brings further complexity. What's the special element about Lanzarote? Lanzarote is one of the Canary Islands. It has been traditionally marketed to the mass market. And what did people say at that point? They said both the private and the public sector, but mainly the private sector. They said, we want less visitors. We want high-value visitors, people who really appreciate the destination, who understand who we are, what are our differential values, and that's what they want to highlight. What I find extremely interesting is the kind of model that has emerged. We designed a governance model through which the pre-existing features got totally disrupted. And that's something that is sometimes scary, because normally we think of the public sector being here and the public sector here, and normally the public sector is divided and they ask for certain things to the public sector. That's the way it has happened many times. But in this particular model, we have the public sector and the private sector working at the same level and having very clearly defined what all of them have to do, and in a combined strategy where all of them are involved. They got together more than 120 companies, most of which are very small. We are not talking about large corporations. We have also big hotel companies that are international, but most of these companies are local. They represent the community. Some of these companies are not even directly related to tourism, and they decided to do this work together to do this repositioning strategy. And right now we are doing the implementation, both for the public and the private sector, in perfect coordination. In our strategy, there is one element that is key to sustainability. It's a shared value approach, following Porter's theory. And in here, of course, it goes beyond corporate social responsibility, but it places the tourists at the center. Tourists are going to be part of this. When they travel to Lanzarote, they can feel that they are causing a positive transformation, that they are doing something that leaves a legacy there, that there is a connection to the place. And this is going to be led by the private sector, not the public one, by these more than 120 companies that are going to define projects that are going to have an impact in Lanzarote, not only from the environmental perspective, but also from the social one, which sometimes we forget. Preserving heritage, generating new business opportunities for everybody, also for women, this kind of activities, and we are doing it with artisans and local artists, and it's really amazing. And when I talk to these business people that have been there for many years, all of them, they say the same. This is not for having more profit tomorrow or after tomorrow. We don't even know if we're going to earn anything directly from this project, but it's going to be beneficial for us in the midterm. This is going to position the island much better, and it's going to be good for everybody. And they are honest, and they are frank, and this is something I never thought of. I am from there, it's my home island, and if you asked me 2 years ago if this could happen, if people would get together in such a way, I would have said, no, that's impossible.
Because you mentioned package holidays, and yes, that is the reputation there. At the same time, these package holiday destinations, these places, they do provide an awful lot of work for local people. Are we saying that that's it? We don't want those anymore?
No, that's impossible. And actually, it's not in this repositioning strategy. Maybe you will have less of this mass market share, and it will decrease, and the other high value part will increase. So it's not going to be a total switch. I mean, that's impossible, not in the short term. But this is a long-term strategy anyway. But this kind of model provides more opportunities for locals. Why? Because here, when we do the product development exercise, we need to come up with very immersive experiences. Something that takes you to places that even if you have been there 10 times, you would never visit if you didn't go with somebody. So we are working with locals, and we're going to provide opportunities to fishermen, to farmers, to artisans, and they are going to be protagonists at the center of this new value proposition. And that is going to provide a lot more, because we have, there in Lanzarote, unemployment is very high, even if tourism is 30% of the GDP, and it's full the whole year round, I mean, pre-pandemic. So this is something that we need to change.
Okay, all year round tourism is a very crucial thing, wasn't it? Frédéric, Paris, it's a big city. How do you get local in Paris? You've got the Olympics coming up in 2024. That should be a big developing spree. It should be means it does. It did in other countries. It meant whole new developments, building, everything. What's happening in Paris?
Bonjour. Donc, je suis désolé, je vais m'exprimer en français, mais vous avez une traduction et c'est plus simple pour moi pour les propos. Donc oui, on va avoir les Jeux Olympiques en 2024. Avant les Jeux Olympiques, ou plutôt parce qu'on a les Jeux Olympiques, on a des Jeux Olympiques qui vont être des Jeux Olympiques, comme vous le savez, éco-responsables, sobres.
As we know, we're going to have the Olympics, and we've organized these while competing with our cities. The aim for us, besides hosting the Olympics, is to have a very attractive tourist capital like Paris. It's the most visited city in the world with 3 million tourists. I'm not sure this is right, but anyway, it's a city that is quite attractive for tourists. We have two challenges. The first is eco-responsibility. Paris is quite committed to these issues, or has been for some time. Recently, Rajan said that 7% of the Paris GDP comes from tourism. The greenhouse gas comes from tourism. The impact of greenhouse gases impacts, and these included both airports.
des émissions de gaz à effet de serre de la ville sont ces aéroports.
Paris, 42% of the greenhouse gases come from these airports. Why am I telling you this? Because we have tourism, which is eco-responsible, sustainable, and the main challenge for us after the crisis is over is to confront these challenges. We hope we can do that. And secondly, we are the main city from the perspective of tourist lodging.
Aucune règle de ce point de vue-là. À Paris, on a fait plusieurs.
We have an American platform
Désertifié un certain nombre de quartiers, notamment des quartiers du centre.
for local
Sur la question du logement pour les habitants. Pas qu'à Paris que ce phénomène-là joue.
housing. And the phenomenon created this effect that locals had to leave their houses, and through that there was an increase of rents, was a desertification of the housing in Paris. And so we need tourism to respect the city's inhabitants and eco-responsibility. We don't want a lose-lose solution. In Amsterdam, for instance, before COVID, we've learned with our lesson, knowing that if we continue to do things like this, we won't be able to solve these issues. So we have at a meeting which engaged all professionals from the tourist sector, and we discussed how can we implement sustainable tourism in Paris with less airplanes, with better transports. How can we organize bicycles, so people using bicycles to go around instead motorized vehicles. So this was discussed in these meetings on sustainable tourism that we organized, and the Olympics will also be included in this philosophy. And when tourists come back to Paris, of course, this tourism can be more local. We have 80% of tourists who are European, only 20% come from outside Europe. And we have a minority who are French. These are all urgent issues, and we have to face them and deal with them. This is a job for the Secretary of State for Tourism, but the municipality in Paris has to be concerned also. We want a city that remains appealing, attractive. We don't want to say that we're going to divide the number of tourists by two, to half them. We want Paris to be attractive in different places. If you go to Paris after the lockdown and the pandemic, what do you want to do? Maybe you want to rent a bike and visit Paris cycling, because of course the older streets in the center of the city does not allow the use of automobiles anymore. So bikes are very popular, and there is this supply in some places, but this is not true for Paris. Our challenge is situated here in Paris. We could not go on thinking that 42% of our greenhouse gases emissions come from our two airports. So we must solve this.
I'm aware that some of you, and Dianne, do you speak French? Because you probably haven't got the ability to. So I'm just going to quickly try and summarize that, which is that, number one, the fact you named at the end, which is that 42% of emissions come from the two airports. Obviously a big recognition that tourism is causing issues in Paris. And that the other aspect is that you have these committees, you have these meetings. It's all part of the destination management committee thing, is that right?
Pour la destination, c'est ceux qui viennent,
Yeah.
simplement, sur les 42%.
Okay. And obviously the Olympics is going to present a big challenge, but I'm going to develop later on in this discussion the kind of things kind of going local, going micro, closing down. Where exactly is the real energy? What's happening? How much is it coming from the bottom up? How much is it from people below? Or how much is it that the Paris, the mayor's office or whoever are saying, we want you to do this? But we will talk about that later, if that's okay. Okay. So I try to summarize that.
On veut le faire collectivement, c'est-à-dire qu'on veut entraîner tout le monde par rapport à ce qu'on a fait. Et pour l'instant, dans les assises qu'on a fait, on a eu l'ensemble des partenaires du tourisme, y compris des partenaires.
In those meetings we've organized to discuss tourism, when I talk about those 42% emissions coming from the airports, when I talk about this, if we have people from the airports, they won't like this very much. They won't love me for that. We don't want to say that airplanes are a bad thing and we should instead use bikes or trains or whatever. We could give examples like Brazil, China, etc. But if we don't collaborate to find solutions, the very inhabitants of cities will flee from their places. So the Airbnb platform, etc., this poses a problem. It really didn't bring solutions for the problems of the inhabitants. We have limited these Airbnb places, and we had to do that, otherwise we would find no solutions for the problem.
Thank you. The reason why I'm delaying is because I'm hearing the translation. Yes, just genuinely, I mean, I can't possibly, Dianne, or to anybody else, summarize all that, or translate all that, but you kind of get the idea that, yes, they are looking for solutions in Paris, and again, we will look more at that and discuss more of that. Luís, Portugal. Now, we've gone from like local communities to Lanzarote to Paris to Portugal. How do you, in your position, encourage sustainability in local communities? How do you make sure they have got a voice in this? Can you give me some examples?
Yes. So, is this working? No. Now?
Yep.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So how do we encourage sustainability in Portugal? We're a national organization, a public organization, depends on the Minister and the Secretary of State for Tourism. How do we encourage sustainability? I think this is not the role of the public sector or the private sector, it's individually. In 2017, we launched a strategy asking, and it took us almost 1 year asking people, and we made several workshops, several open discussions in the entire country and even outside the country, asking people, what do you want for your country, for tourism, for the next 10 years, until 2027? And the conclusions of that are in the strategy 2027. Sustainability is at its center, everyone said. Environmental and social sustainability, but also economical for sure. And most important, we've identified 3 kinds of people. Everything we do has to do with 3 kinds of people. The tourists, we want them to have the best experience in our country. The labor, the workers that work for tourism, 10% of the working force in Portugal works for tourism. We want them to see this career as a future career and to develop their own businesses. And the third part, the locals. We want them to recognize tourism as a force for good, as a positive thing. So everything we do, from training to finance, from regulation to promotion, has to do with this. And I'll give you a few examples. Tourism of Portugal supports several private and public projects. We don't do that if they are not sustainably environmental and socially. Our training is very much focused on sustainability, not in a matter, and I think this is one of the challenges for the future also for the private sector, not in a matter to have better operations or being more efficient in your work, but how can you be more, I would say, happy in your future life in terms of responsibility with the planet and with the other. So I would say that having this strategy in place, having a very strong purpose that Portugal has, which is welcoming everyone and respecting the differences. I couldn't think of a more sustainable quote than this. And finally, having an effective plan, financially supported both by the government and our institution to support the public and the private sector is, I would say, what encourages sustainability in the long term in Portugal.
So how much of that is initiated by local communities? How much, like all around Portugal, are communities coming up with ideas and saying, we want to do this, maybe coming to you for some funding or some help or whatever? Is that's happening?
Yes, sure. And I think, and you touched a very good point. The problem is not having ideas and good examples. The problem is having funding. The problem is having openness to accept these kind of changes. The problem is lowering your barriers and recognizing that you have problems and you have to address them, and they have to be addressed with very pragmatical and very concrete cases. So I would say that ideas, we don't have lack of ideas. We need support, definitely, financial support. Tourism needs financial support, and I have to say that the Minister of France said a very pragmatic thing, which is we always took tourism for granted. Everyone in the world. Now we don't. And we recognize that a simple sneeze or a simple flu can become a pneumonia to tourism sector. And this is important for everyone, from the public to the private sector, nationally, internationally, locally and globally, to understand this. It's not just, we don't throw a seed to the land and something grows. We need support. And this has to be, and this is clear, and we see that from every country. So I would say that, of course, in our case, we do support those projects. We have specific funding for several projects. We even had a specific line for sustainability and develop projects in restoration of buildings, in supporting local economies. We have a wonderful project with our tourism schools to give training to migrants, which is something that we should address too. And we have more than 170 migrants in Portugal that were trained by the school and now are working, and some of them even have their own business. So I would say that finance is the issue.
Yep.
Political support is the issue. Internationally, we need a strong voice. We need strong voices about the tourism sector, because we've passed this crisis, but no one knows if we're not having another one. So,
yeah. Frédéric, you want to make a comment?
Oui, je voulais réagir par rapport à ce qui vient d'être dit, parce qu'il y a un mot important qui est la question de la coopération, parce que quand on parle de tourisme durable, soutenable.
When we talk about sustainable tourism, this is a more resilient tourism that resists to crisis. It's not just COVID. I'm not announcing the end of the world. I'm not heralding this disgrace. But this is a period of crisis, which is much more relevant. Between 2015 and 2020, we have the attempts. We have the pandemic. We have all the demonstrations. We have to work towards a tourism sector that is stronger instead of depending on international flows. So in periods like, for instance, climate change, and let's remember what happened in New York, Belgium, Germany, the floods, the rain, etc. So we must work towards a type of tourism that is not necessarily more local, but a cooperative tourism. So this concept is important, and a more sustainable tourism, not as concerns co-responsibility, not only as concerns co-responsibility, and this is important to keep in mind.
Just picking up as well on the point that you made, Luís, about, for instance, teaching local migrant communities, how much are you, and this is a bugbear of mine, and this maybe relate to you as well, Dianne, which is that how much are migrant communities, let's face it, who have been in many countries now for generations, how much is their heritage now sold, if you like, by the country as being part of the tourist offer? I have a big issue, I'll be honest with you, with English heritage and the Visit England and all that stuff, where you just have image. You know, I still think they are peddling too much the idea of Windsor Castle, the Queen, old history, blah, blah, blah. Why aren't we getting more of the vibrant kind of energy that migrant communities are providing? Now, you are talking, I presume, about indigenous communities to a certain extent, Dianne, as well there. Are they getting a look in?
Look, I think there's a huge groundswell of support in Indigenous communities, but also migrant communities for tourism. And, you know, from what I see, they've got an incredible offer. And I've seen, you know, I've worked in Denmark and Sweden with refugee communities who are offering tours and offering access to their refugee kitchens and giving tours about how they see their life in their new home and their new country. So it's a completely different perspective that they're offering, and locals actually, to extend what a tourist means, it's locals that go on those tours because they're seeing their own place through a different lens. And so that is really bubbling up. And the other thing about Indigenous issues is that for most Indigenous peoples, they've always been social enterprises. They've always wanted to give back to their communities and to better their culture and to maintain their culture. So if we can get them more involved in tourism, it means that they've got a stronger possibility of maintaining their cultural and their cultural heritage, their language and everything else. So there's enormous opportunities, and I think that's really bubbling up from what I'm seeing at the moment.
Because if we talk about community tourism, that is a very good illustration of that. It's a very big sector and possibly growing sector. I'm interested in the perspective of the tourist, okay? You're a tourist. You want to come to Lanzarote. You want the beaches. You want, you know, in a sense, you want that stuff too. How do you say to them, look, come and explore more than that. Come and explore the community and the culture and the heritage. How do you do that?
You know what has happened?
Yeah, microphone.
What has happened after...
It's on.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. After COVID, the kind of visitors that Lanzarote started to receive were completely different to the previous ones. Traditionally, it has always been British, Germans, Scandinavians, but after the pandemic, we had only French and people from Belgium and Spaniards, and they didn't want to go to the beach. They wanted to go around, and we had been talking for years about experiences, about going to places, about offering something different, about authenticity, and all of a sudden, people discovered that we had to offer that. And I had many discussions with the hotel directors, and they were like looking for things every day and trying to offer these people new things that were up to their, expectations. And it has been a great summer. And they care more about culture, heritage, gastronomy, local traditions. And then again, as I said before, this has had a broader impact for the local community because it hasn't, the benefits of tourism have spread a lot more. So I think this is what's going to happen, that what used to be, and the standards are changing, and now you can mostly receive everything, is happening also with airlines that are now flying to places that they never thought of 2 years ago, and now there are direct flights to places that you would have never imagined. So everything is shaking up, and I think we have to be ready for that. So I think you need to have the right product. That's to begin with. I mean, we cannot talk about sustainability just theoretically. You need to have a product that is sustainable in reality, and you have to be ready to these changes that are sudden. You have to be flexible, and this requires another sort of organization. What we had before is not enough. Even to design a new tourism experience, the way we are talking about, that has to be fully sustainable, that is a lot more sophisticated, it requires a very large of stakeholders. Some of them, sometimes they don't even have a website. They have a little business, and that's what makes the whole thing special, because you're going to go, I don't know, to a lady who makes cheese, for example, and you need to have a business model behind, where everybody, that is transparent, there's legitimacy there, so that everybody knows what to expect from that business model. And this is not easy, because it means that you need to collaborate. In certain cultures, it might be easier, but in other cultures, to do something together, to cooperate, is not that obvious. So there's a learning exercise there, and that needs to be designed strategically in such a way that everybody knows what to expect. So that's, I think, what the biggest challenge right now is: how are we going to learn to work together? It's not only public-private, or it's like, how are all those people that sometimes they have never done that are going to do it in a transparent way, open to anybody else who's, really fulfilling those requirements. That's the biggest challenge, and because people don't know how to do it.
So that's training, that's investment, that's marketing.
It's doing it. You learn by doing it. But that's what I've seen in this project. You can talk, and of course you need funding, you need support from the public sector, you need a lot of elements, but it's a question of willingness, it's a question of leadership. That's critical. You have to have leadership. You never know where leadership comes up, how it comes out, and where is it coming from. Sometimes you discover leadership in somebody that you never expected. But the thing is that if you don't have it, that's never going to happen. But you have to have a project. You have to say, this is the goal, this is the objective. We're going to have 6 of these experiences in 2 months' time. And we're going to engage the whole local community. And we're going to do it. And then you have the workshops, and then you meet people, and then you start designing it. First it's more simple, then you add complexity, and then it has a price. It's going to be 2 days or 3 days. It has to be, of course, you have to adapt it to the different type of customers. But that's what we have been doing during the summer, and the first day was difficult, and 3 days after was easier, and now people are aligned, and we're all thinking the same terms. It's by doing. We cannot be talking all the time. We have to go sometimes and lose our fear and say, we're going to do it. It's not going to be perfect at the beginning, so what? It's much better than having nothing. And then we're going to improve it as we go. And then the first time is only like the visionary, people who like to do things out of the box, people who are excited by these challenges, and other people hate it. And then once it's defined, all of the rest of the people follow. And that's amazing. But sometimes we have to start. And I think it's important we stop talking and we start doing things.
Sounds like you're doing things. And I want to put this to you, both Nicholas and Frédéric, which is, you also have to deal with the big corporations, the big multinationals, the people who want to build new hotels, and that will earn you income, foreign exchange, all those things. How do you manage to balance what they want with what the local communities want? Are you in the middle? Luís first.
If we're in the middle, we're in the beginning, in the middle, in the end. We're everywhere. It's not, I mean, my biggest point here is, and I said this morning, tourism is also seen as the victims or the villains. And everyone points the finger. Whenever something happens, it's guilty tourism. Either because we have too many tourists, We forget that someone that buys a house in Lisbon and lives in Lisbon is not a tourism anymore. They're local. So they have their own opinion, and they should be addressed too. And sometimes it's not a matter that tourism doesn't do their role. It's the other partners and the authorities don't take care of what kind of data do we have to manage a situation like having a flood of people and then those people going away. How do I manage that in terms of traffic? How do I manage collecting the garbage with someone that stays in a local lodging like Airbnb? You don't say the name, I can say. In a local lodging like Airbnb, doesn't know where to put the garbage. What kind of communication do you have if you live in a city or if you're responsible for a city? Is it just for the people who live there and vote on you? Or is it for everyone that lives there permanently or temporarily? So the more we think about these things, the better solutions we will have. Because otherwise we will be always tackling problems without understanding the bottom of the problem. And I think I'm also president of the European Travel Commission, and I think Europe has a role here to do in the world. We welcome 700 million visitors a year. The values of Europe are very well defended if the tourism sector is alive and kicking. That's for sure. And we have to see this. Values like equality, diversity, democracy, rule of law, freedom of movement are essential to tourism, but are also fundamentally subsidized by tourism. So that's why I protect so much, and I say that we should take this sector, which is, and I have to say, this is no longer the industry of peace. That's something which is secondary. It's the industry of the planet. I couldn't think of a better industry, more sustainable if taken well and if done well, with partnerships, based on data, based on knowledge, with a clear purpose for the rest of the world than this industry.
Frédéric.
C'est dans le dialogue, je prends un exemple parisien, le dialogue qu'on peut avoir avec le groupe Hocquard. Ils étaient là tout à l'heure, il y avait Brune Poisson qui était là ce matin.
There was a representative of the Hocquard hotel chain. When we met them, these issues of sustainability, eco-responsibility, etc., should be included in the discussion because there is added value here. I said both things. First, bikes. Don't forget to have bikes in your hotels. People will choose your hotels instead of choosing other hotels. They have about 150 hotels, and you can have these bikes available for your guests. Also, the territorial issue. You can build hotels in the eastern part of Paris. We have to discuss things like what type of buildings, youth hostels, etc. We must, of course, build inside these neighborhoods to create dynamics and maybe I seem materialistic, but this is the way we should go about to creating partnerships.
Quelle est la ville de Paris et la puissance privée qu'est le touristique peuvent se retrouver sur un certain nombre d'objectifs.
To create this tourist sector in Paris with the same objectives.
Even in tourism. So when we talk about the challenges of future, one of the challenges of future is labor, people. We should address this. There is a huge responsibility from our sides, but it's not just the small and medium enterprise that is in Portugal or in France or in Paris that is responsible. It's the big corporations, and we have to deal with this. The training has to be given according to what that person needs and not according to what my enterprise needs, especially if it's a big enterprise. We need to have, more than have salaries, we need to have career plans. And we need to compromise with that. And I don't see compromises with that. We need to compromise. This morning I was saying, more than 50% of the people that work in tourism are women. Only 5% of the biggest corporations in the world for tourism, only 5% are women.
Yeah. How do you change that? How do you become part of the change of that?
Compromise. There's just two ways. Either it's by regulation or compromise. I prefer compromise because I think we've reached a point that it's much better to have one of these companies saying, I will do this because this is sustainable. And sometimes when we talk about sustainability, we forget about this part. And this is the most important part of sustainability. If we tackle this and if we correct this, we will have a better planet. Instead of just focusing if we have solar planets or if we spend too much water in our hotel.
It's interesting you mentioned that, just as an aside, in the UK what's happening now is there's a huge, I don't know if this is true in other countries, there's a huge shortage of people who want to work in hospitality.
It's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
All the world, you can ask any country. It's the same. And that's why we have to attract these. And we lost many during COVID. Many.
Yeah.
So this is a critical thing for all Europe and for the world. And when I talk about migration, the example that we have in Portugal could be and should be done all over Europe.
Great. Okay, thank you. Dianne, I've got about 10 minutes. Am I hogging the time because it's my session and there's nobody to stop me from keeping this going? I don't know. Are we okay for time? What time? Someone give me this because I've left my... 10 minutes, okay. I think there's a thing there. Dianne, I want to ask you, how much do you think your model is transferable, if you like, to other places around the world? Or is it only specific to what you do in Australia?
No.
Can't hear you.
What we're yeah,
okay.
You there?
Yep.
Yes. What we're actually doing is regenerative tourism is a label, but it is about this mindset shift and this change by working from the ground up, and we use co-design principles. So we're actually doing and experimenting on the way, and so it's actually not a model that's only built for the circumstances and the places that I work in. It's actually a compilation of 25 years of research, but also working across 4 continents and a number of countries. So it is actually already transferable, and there's a number of destinations who are doing great things in the regenerative tourism space. Flanders, Bay of Plenty in New Zealand, I think Ireland's even got into it. So there's a number of destinations that are doing this, and I just wanted to reinforce what a little bit of what Luís said, is that regenerative tourism actually does take responsibility, and it asks communities and businesses to think about what future they want and to work towards that. So I think that's the difference between sustainability and regeneration, is that we're really trying to encourage people to think about what their ethics and their responsibility are towards people, labour, the planet, and that sort of thing. So definitely.
Okay. Yolanda, I got the impression that in a kind of way you were saying that you want the right kind of tourist to come to Lanzarote. What is the right kind of tourist?
Somebody who's, somebody who's responsible. It's like this paradigm of the new era. Somebody who's responsible, somebody who wants to transcend, somebody who wants to leave a legacy, somebody who wants to really understand the place that is visiting, somebody who respects the community in that place. It's about responsibility, it's about some sort of higher values. It's like, we all have a responsibility here, and our responsibility is every day, even when we are going on holidays. And I think it's that kind of person. I think, well, sometimes before, some people used to call them like the people from the creative society. I think now that has expanded to a lot more people, also because of COVID, because people felt a lot more fragile. But I think that's the kind of people we want. And it's like, if you attract a type of customer, a type of the traveler who does not care if he is in one place or another because he's going to be by the beach, sunbathing all the time, okay, that's perfectly fine. But if you have this other type of person who really wants to go around and understand and try the local food and interact with the people, I think that's much better for both the visitors and the place itself. So that's what we need to foster. But then again, that requires a lot of organization, it's difficult, and it requires the right type of product. Because sometimes you have all the resources, but those resources are just there, and you need to organize all that in such a way that it can be marketed properly. That's the big challenge.
I mean, to take it to its logical conclusion in a way, you can have places, and they do exist. I mean, someone was telling me about Botswana and safari parks where they, as a tourist, you have to pass certain tests in a way in order to be allowed to go there. I mean, you know, it's not, hopefully, it doesn't sound as forbidding as it may sound there. But do you understand what I'm saying? That as a host community, you are, I suppose, entitled for tourists to behave in a certain way. You're entitled to make those requests, more than requests, demands of your visitor. You think that's okay to say? I'm talking to you, Yolanda, and you can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were addressing me or them, because
I mean, anybody can come in, but yes, yeah.
Because I work for many destinations, and I don't know if you were talking about something like that. I think the locals have the legitimacy to decide what their economic model must be. And if they are saying, we want something different, in the case of Lanzarote, that was the model in the 70s. It's how tourism started because of a visionary person, an artist we had there. Then that changed for many reasons, but people still remember. And I think it's related to self-esteem, to many other elements. I think visitors have a large influence in the place they visit, and I think if we have that type of traveler, and we try to attract it with the right product, because you have to have the right value proposition, then it's going to be even better for them. I mean, for the local community. It's like what we see now with remote workers, which I think is very interesting. Because these people, when they live there, they come from big cities, so they are looking for places to eat well, interesting shops and things like that. And when they demand that, that's going to have a good impact, a positive impact on locals too. That they're going to see that the offering around has improved because of these people. And they are normally professionals, they enrich the community. So I think that has to happen. I think, yes, okay. Locals have the legitimacy to ask.
Okay. Just finally, because we are running short time, and at the risk of being optimistic, which is kind of strange for a journalist, but there you go, are we actually seeing a paradigm change here where communities and tourists are working together? There is just a new way of looking at this whole business of tourism. Are you optimistic? Frédéric?
Alors oui, pour deux raisons. La première, c'est que d'abord, nous, on a transformé le Parisien en touriste. Parce que pendant 2 ans, on n'a pas eu...
Yes, for two reasons.
Il y avait un peu de possibilité de circuler en 2020, en 2021, mais les gens ne sont pas venus à Paris.
For 2 years, we did not have tourists. So to some extent, Parisians themselves were tourists. And tourism also turned more to Parisians, to the Paris inhabitants.
Tout le monde a compris.
Secondly,
C'est-à-dire que ce qu'il faut arriver,
everyone realized this.
transforme le territoire sur lequel il va, et le territoire...
The tourist changes the place he or she visits. But the territory, the place also changes the tourist, and this is the key to success. And I think there is still a lot of work to be done here. There was COVID, and we still had some tourism. Parisians became tourists themselves, and that gave us some hints, and it enabled tourism in spite of COVID. So there was a shift here, and the owners of hotels had an opportunity here. So yes, I am an optimistic.
The phrase that tourists change the place, but the place changes the tourist. So it's a constantly self-reinforcing system, which is great. Luís, are you optimistic?
Yes. for two reasons.
I mean, specifically about this, yes, that community tourism, essentially, yeah.
I'm optimistic about tourism and about the future of the world if tourism leads the way. And we have to put things this way. It's not what are we going to do to change tourism, is what will tourism do to change the world? And I think this is the question. This is the main question. And we can do a lot for two reasons. First, we've seen how fragile this sector is, and everyone recognizes the importance of tourism right now. And second, we have changed. I have changed, you have changed, we've all changed. So this is opportunity to plant the seeds of sustainability in everyone's head. So it's not the time to prevent people from entering a city or a place or a region or whatever. It's a matter of explaining things, having clear communication, dealing with the problems, solving them collectively. So I'm optimistic.
And give the initiative to the communities, to the bottom up.
But the communities, one simple communities are made of people. Like big corporations, like politicians, like
really?
like presenters. Yeah. So it's a matter of communication and cooperation, clearly.
Fantastic. Are you optimistic, Dianne? Do you think? No. More importantly, is this a paradigm shift that is irreversible?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do believe it's a paradigm shift where we're really addressing some of the core challenges that we've been ignoring for the last 20 or so odd years. So we're really getting towards that paradigm shift. I'm incredibly optimistic because what I'm seeing is an unleashing of local communities' creativity and their ingenuity to actually engage in tourism and find new businesses and new ways of engaging with tourists. And I think it's enriching both the residents and the tourist lives. So incredibly optimistic am I, yes.
Thank you. Have I asked you? Yeah, fine, I can come back to you if you want.
I can say it again. Yes, I'm very optimistic.
Very good, thank you.